everybody, welcome back to But Why the Podcast, and today we are starting spooky season early with the king of horror himself, Stephen King. As always, I'm Kate, I'm here with Adrian.
Hey, how's it going?
And Matt.
Hello.
And if you've listened to spooky episodes of this podcast before, you know exactly what guest I'm going to announce right now. Alex.
It's me, I'm back, I'm here to be spooky.
And
yes.
why don't you tell everybody listening where they can find you on the interwebs?
Well, for this episode, you can find me on Friday.com. It's a genre and horror news and review website. I'm one of the editors there. And then I also have Game Boys Podcast, which is a co-op gaming podcast on GoombaStomp.com. And I used to have a podcast called What We Talk About When We Talk About, which is a pop culture show that we have since ended just like a month ago, which is still weird, but the episodes are still out there.
It's a real good podcast. Y'all should go binge it.
All 160 hours of it.
Yeah.
So we are going to start off with our question being, what's your favorite Stephen King story? This can be any one of his many adaptations of his works. It can be his actual novels. It can be a novella. It can be an episode of TV that was based on some random thing that somebody found that he wrote. Yes, those exist. Or it can be stuff from under his pen name. So, go.
So you gave us a list of this adaptation, and I'm looking through this, and it's been a hard choice. So I'm just gonna name. I actually have seen more than I thought I've seen. That is for sure. I guess if I have to pick one, I'm gonna go with the Shawshank Redemption probably the most. But I do want to at least give a shout out to at least the original Carrie, not whatever the hell that other one was.
You mean the Sissy Spacek, right? Not the 90s?
Yeah, Brian De Palma.
Yeah, not whatever the hell that other one is that came later.
Sure.
I don't count that one. That one don't exist.
That one's not that bad.
Is it compared to the original?
So we'll talk about adaptation stuff that happens with Stephen King because there's a lot of issues. The stuff that people love, he tends to hate, and the stuff that people hate, he tends to love.
Yeah, well, I mean that sounds about right. And I want to do also The Misery.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with.
Adrian?
I haven't read any of the books, which I think comes as no surprise to anybody who's listened to our podcast before. But movie-wise, I do like Cujo.
Not a bad one.
Yeah.
I like Stand By Me, even though it's like kind of not in the other stuff. Stand By Me's good.
That is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
The Green Mile.
Oh, that was the other one I was going to say too.
Yeah.
My top 3 on this list. And also
Solid
from
choice.
like the Dark Tower stuff from what I've, read. I haven't seen the movie, but I know like some of the comic stuff I liked.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's some stuff in there.
I do want to say, too, as Adrian and Matt pulled out stuff that wasn't horror, although he is known as the king of horror, he pretty much runs through the entire gambit of genre.
I like to say I did not pull stuff that was horror when 2 of the 3 movies I did were probably
But your
horror.
favorite one was The Shawshank Redemption, which is
That could still be horror.
No.
Based on your classification of all this stuff.
Incarceration horror?
Yeah.
Oh
like
my
falsely
God.
incarcerated? That could be a horror.
I hate that I
Anyway.
even contributed to this argument.
I hate that you did too, Alex. That's not why you're here. I'll go next, so Alex can top us off. My favorite is Kubrick's The Shining, which I
support
kind of
that.
can't count as a Stephen King work because he changed it so much, which is also why Stephen King hates the best horror movie ever made.
And then remade it in the 90s on like a made-for-TV special.
Oh yeah, and it's real bad. It's like it's a 4-part like 8-hour miniseries that is just real bad. But like my favorite like I guess like Stephen King piece is actually Pet Sematary, both the book and Mary Lambert's version. The remake is actually also really good, which blew me away because I expected it to be bad.
Yeah.
And then I would probably have to say, to top it off, Misery, and I'd probably say a nice tie between Thinner and Firestarter.
Okay.
I think
yeah,
Thinner
those
is
are all
one that
good.
people sleep on because Thinner is real good.
Firestarter.
I don't know that I know that one actually.
So Thinner is the one where this really like it's a body horror film. Essentially, there's this dude who's like really, really obese. He's like a white collar lawyer, makes a whole bunch of money. He pisses somebody off, and essentially his body just keeps deteriorating over and
Oh.
over and over, and he can't gain weight and he can't keep weight, and it's
It's like
because
a
he
reverse
screwed
Santa
somebody
Claus.
over. Yeah, it's essentially Drag Me to Hell, but all body horror, and he essentially wastes away.
That's crazy. I like that. I think probably Stand By Me is one that's actually pretty up there for me. I think partly because it's just like a very classic, quintessential coming of age type movie set in the 50s. It's like The Sandlot, but with the dead body.
Yeah. The Sandlot, but dead body.
Yeah.
Oh, it's The Sandlot, but make it spooky by adding a dead body.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think honestly, pretty high up there for me is the It story as a whole. I specifically really liked the 2017 part 1. Just the casting for those kids was really great, and the way they did it was great. There was like a little bit too much CG at points, but ultimately, like I had a good time with it, and I really, really enjoyed it.
I feel like Alex and I are gonna are gonna be on opposite ends this episode.
That could be, but I also The Shining is also up. Is probably that my top two are The Shining and It.
I just meant because I really don't like the remake of it.
Really, I
2017. Yeah.
don't care for the '90s one really at all.
I'm gonna fight you.
Okay, I'll tell you now what my reasoning is Tim Curry, the voice that Tim Curry went with for that version of Pennywise is this like gruff New Englander or whatever, and it just reminds me of Krusty the Clown, and it kind of takes any fear out of it for me.
That's fair. Okay, I had never heard that critique before. That's fair. That being said,
what unsettles me about Bill Skarsgård is that the way he's playing that character, like he's using this dopey voice, he's dancing, he is literally like a demon pretending to be a clown and having fun with it. And to me, that's a lot more terrifying. That he like, there's that scene where he like grabs Eddie by the wrist and like pretends he's gonna eat his fingers, like people would do with like a small child. And I was like, this is so much worse. This is so much worse than I smoke a pack a day Tim Curry. Like calling to you from a sewer drain.
For me, is that, and I don't know if it's because everybody memed it to hell, but like it's just It Chapter 1 in 2017 is way too funny. I don't need Pennywise doing a jig or holding a hand as Adrian does on camera.
I know the hand waving was morbid. I
thought it was funny.
I mean, it was funny, but it was like very much a dark humor point, I think.
Well, so that was just, yeah, this is not an It episode, but yeah. No, we'll probably come into a lot of these things, but that is something that is like Stephen King, more than any other author, facilitates discussions like these because nobody can not touch his work multiple times.
Yes.
So I know we announced a lot of movies and stuff. I do want to give a shout out to a TV show, The Dead Zone, which I actually watched. Was pretty good.
Oh, nice.
Which is also on here, and I don't think we had a TV actual show mentioned.
Yeah.
I was with it for the first like 4 or 5 years. I understand why it got canceled after like season 5 because the last season or so just got confusing. But yes.
Yeah. So
and honestly, it's kind of. Oh, go for it.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's kind of a wonder that more of his stuff isn't just adapted straight to TV, only because it's so long.
Yeah.
So, like, when people look at, like, this 650-page book and they're like, I could cut that down to 2 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a really bold assumption of you versus, like, I could cut that down to 8 hours and do, like, a one-season TV show.
Yeah. I do think my favorite TV show is actually Rose Red, but that's not so much, it wasn't based on a novel that he did. That was him saying, I want to write this adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House. And then he pitched it to the company and they went with the terrible Catherine Zeta-Jones one instead. And then Stephen King was like, I have money. I'm Stephen King. I'm going to go sell this to a network and make my version of it.
I mean, that's kind of what his career's become at this point, right? Is just, it's about having that fuck you money.
Yep.
Like where he didn't like Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, and so he just went around and made his own version of it. There was all the
I will
comments that
say-
have been coming out lately about him saying, like, I've outlived most of my critics, and that feels pretty good. Like, he doesn't care anymore.
I will say
Really
I'm
doesn't.
disappointed in Kate because you did not mention The Mist, the movie that you seem to do all the
Yeah,
time.
I thought
yeah.
for sure you were
Well,
going to mention the
Yeah.
Mist.
There's a lot of Stephen King stuff, guys.
Yeah, but you download The Mist every time we go on an airplane.
Yes, I do. It's real weird. I don't know why I do it, but I do it.
You've
Why
watched
would
that
you do
movie at
when you
least
could watch the
18 times
Langoliers
since.
on an airplane?
Okay, I will not watch the Langoliers on an airplane. So this is the hard thing for me. It is actually really hard to narrow it down because, like, I grew up watching all of these damn things on USA. Like, my family was obsessed with Stephen King's, like, mini series and movies, and so there's just so much that I love. I do really love The Mist, and I know people don't like the TV show, but I really like the TV show too. But the movie with Thomas Jane is grossly underrated for its very, very deep and dark ending. But The Langoliers is really good, and I also do have to say, like, when it comes to TV stuff, Kingdom Hospital is something that I don't think people remember happened because it just kind of ended. Which always makes me think about how Stephen King was like, endings are boring. They're just another goodbye. Goodbye, Dark Tower series. You're never getting another one.
Have you seen It Chapter 2 yet?
I have not, and I'm real mad about it.
Okay. I'll just tell you now because I think it's hysterical. One of the running jokes in it is that Bill, as an author, is terrible at writing endings.
That's perfect.
And they just dunk on Stephen King repeatedly.
Yeah, Stephen King's real bad at endings.
Yeah.
Real bad. But yeah, no, I there is a lot. And as Matt said, I do for some reason download The Mist every time we go on a plane. Again, I don't know why. It
That's
just
such a
happens.
choice.
I mean, I guess it's kind of like I have a lot of anxiety. Let me watch these other people going through a very anxious situation, and when my plane touches down, I'm fine.
I get that. But not the Langoliers.
I don't, but
No, not the Langoliers. Which
here's
by
the
the
thing, as a
way,
movie-
don't ever. If you watch the Langoliers as a kid and were scared, don't ever watch it again. Ever. Just
Is it
never,
bad?
never put that on, dude.
I remember
the
enjoying
flying-
it until you
the
see the
flying
Langoliers.
things- That's the problem. The Langoliers look like fizz gigs.
They're just
From
like
the Dark
floating balls
Crystal.
with teeth. Floating balls of hair with
Yes.
teeth.
Yeah, they look like fizz gigs.
And like very poorly mid-90s 3D animated.
It's so bad. But yeah, so we should get to Stephen King now. Although I
Yeah,
feel
yeah, let's
like
do it.
our discussion on all of his stuff, and I need everybody to understand that is just the very tippy top surface of what Stephen King has done in his career. There is a whole lot more. So Stephen King is an American author of horror, supernatural, suspense, science fiction, and fantasy. His books have sold more than 350 million copies, many of which have been adapted into feature films, miniseries, television series, and comic books. As a total, King has published 61 novels, including 7 under his pen name Richard Bachman, and 6 nonfiction books. He has also written approximately 200 short stories, most of which have been published in book collections. If you didn't know this, you should, because at the start of almost every Stephen King adaptation, it will be based on a novella by Stephen King. That's one of his many, many stories. King has also received Bram Stoker Awards, World Fantasy Awards, British Fantasy Society Awards. He has if there is a award to win as a genre writer, he pretty much has them. In 2003, the National Book Foundation awarded him the Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters, and he also received awards for his contribution to literature for his entire oeuvre, such as the World Fantasy Award for Life Achievement and the Grand Master Award at the Mystery Writers for America. And in 2015, King was awarded the National Medal of Arts from the United States National Endowment for the Arts for his contributions to literature. All that being said, when it comes to currently alive authors, Stephen King is the definition of American literature. Which not a lot of people
I
can
don't know
say,
how I
which
feel
is-
about that, but I don't disagree.
we'll get to that a little bit later, but yeah, Stephen King is pretty contested as a good writer. Just cuz his advice is literally write 2,000 words a day. That's his advice.
That's just law of large numbers at that point.
Yeah. So we're going to go into some history, and I did include history about him as a kid because as I read this, and if you know any of Stephen King's work, you're going to notice that there are through lines from a lot of his childhood drama into the works that he's done.
His parents murdered by a clown. His older brother, you want to see a dead body? Showed him the clown. Then he wrongfully went to prison for that clown murder. It all ties together.
When Stephen King was 2, his father left his family. King's mother raised Stephen and his older brother David by herself, sometimes under great financial strain. The family moved to De Pere, Wisconsin, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Stratford, Connecticut. When King was 11, his family returned to Durham, Maine, where his mother cared for her parents until their deaths. She then became a caregiver to a local residential facility for the mentally challenged. King was raised Methodist, but lost his belief in organized religion while he was in high school. While no longer religious, he chooses to believe in the existence of God. This is one of the big through lines for a lot of his books. And
Maine or God?
His version, God, and usually his version of God is very, 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 very Old Testament and not nice. Which is usually all his supernatural stuff. As a child, King witnessed one of his friends being struck and killed by a train.
Oh.
Though he apparently has no memory of the event. His family told him that after leaving home to play with the boy, King returned speechless and seemingly in shock. Only later did his family learn about the kid's death. So this is one of those things where a lot of people tie it to his writing, especially Pet Sematary. But King to this day does not acknowledge that he has a memory of this. So it's kind of up in the air. He sold his first professional story in 1967, which is called The Glass Floor, to Startling Mystery Stories. And after graduating from the University of Maine, King earned a certificate to teach high school, but unable to find a teaching post immediately, initially supplemented his laboring wage by selling short stories to men's magazines such as Cavalier. Many of these early stories have been republished in the collection called The Night Shift. Also, fun fact, Stephen King got a $250 ticket that he could not pay, and he just shopped around his stories until one of them paid him $250 and then paid the ticket that way. And that's when he was like, ooh, I could do this.
That's brilliant.
I applied to the University of Maine and got accepted, but did not attend.
You could have been Stephen King, although we both know that's not true.
No.
Matt would have been the old man in Pet Sematary saying sometimes dead is better.
Yes. Oh my God, he would have been.
You need to move to Maine.
Have had family in Maine. It's an interesting place.
King Salem's Law was published in 1975, and in a 1987 issue of the Highway Patrolman magazine, after his mother's death, King and his family moved to Boulder, Colorado, where King wrote The Shining, which was published in 1977, and then the family returned to Western Maine in 1975, where he completed his fourth novel, The Stand, which was published in 1978. In 1977, the family, with the addition of Owen Phillip, his third and last child, traveled briefly to England, returning to Maine in the fall, where King began teaching as a creative writing professor at the University of Maine.
So does he just own the state of Maine?
Pretty much. I mean, almost all of his stuff is set in pretty much that stuff. So
fun fact, the copy of Salem's Lot that I have is from 1975.
Oh, that's actually really cool.
It's the book club edition.
Oh, that's interesting.
Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry,
so-
continue.
No, this is fine. I'm actually, I should have led with this disclaimer earlier. There's a lot of Stephen King stuff I had a really hard time organizing it. So I'm probably not going to get all your favorite books or all the but why those. Feel free to add us and let us know, or at me and let me know. Um, I guess actually the Dirk Tower books are kind of their own but why though. I should
So
have done
essentially,
that.
we're doing what everybody does with Stephen King's work. We're taking 8 hours worth of stuff and trying to throw it into an hour. Got it.
Yes, that is exactly what's happening. Especially because a lot of his works kind of deserve their own episodes. Like Carrie probably deserves its own episode. It probably deserves its own episode. The Shining probably deserves its own episode. Like, there's a lot to this, so this is just going to be about the man. So, in addition to publishing a lot of books, King wrote his first comic in 1985, writing a few pages of the benefit X-Men comic Heroes for Hope, starring the X-Men. The book, whose profits were donated to assist the famine relief in Africa, was written by a number of different authors in the comic book field, such as Chris Claremont, Stan Lee, and Alan Moore, as well as authors primarily associated in the industry. And then the following year, King published It in 1986, which was the best-selling hardcover novel in the United States that year, and wrote the introduction to Batman number 400, an anniversary issue, in which he expressed his preference for that character over Superman. So Stephen King likes Batman over Superman there.
Hey everyone, do you like But Why Though? Well, the Podcoin app is a podcast player that pays you to listen to this podcast and every other podcast. Just get the Podcoin app on your iPhone or Android and start listening today. It's free and super easy to use, with every minute you listen getting you that sweet, sweet coins. It turns your podcast listening into charity. Or, if you're like me, you can get some Amazon or Starbucks gift cards. I use the Podcoin app to do all my podcast listening now, and I can personally say that I love it. Seriously, just go to the Podcoin app and use invite code BUTWHYTHOugh. That's BUTWHYTHO, and you'll get 300 Podcoin just for signing up if you use our code. That's 300 Podcoin just for signing up using code BUTWHYTHOugh.
Cool.
So
So
go ahead
now
and
we're
give
gonna start a but why
Podcoin
those.
a try today.
Like I said before the break, a lot of Stephen King's work deserves their own episodes, and they'll probably get them in the future. But I do want to take time to mention the two big pieces. The first is Carrie, which jump-started King's career. So in 1973, King's novel Carrie was accepted by publishing house Doubleday. Carrie was King's fourth novel, but it was the first to be published. It was written on a portable typewriter that belonged to his wife, and the novel began as a short story intended for Cavalier magazine, which was a men's magazine, but King tossed the first 3 pages of his work in the garbage can. In comes his wife, Tabitha King, who fished the pages out of the garbage can and encouraged him to finish the story, saying that she would help him with the female perspective, and he followed her advice and expanded it into a novel. King said, I persisted because I was dry and had no better ideas. My considered opinion was that I had written the world's all-time loser. According to The Guardian, Carrie is the story of Carrie White, a high school student with talent, and then as the novel progresses, developing telekinetic powers. It's brutal in places, affecting in others. Carrie's relationship with her almost hysterically religious mother being a particularly damaged one, and gory in even more. When Carrie was chosen for publication, King's phone was out of service, and the Doubleday editor, William Thompson, who would eventually become one of King's closest friends, sent a telegram to King's house in 1973, which read, Carrie officially a Doubleday book. $2,500 advance against royalties. Congrats, kid. The future lies ahead, Bill. According to King, he bought a new Ford Pinto with the money from the advance, which I think is really funny because I'm pretty sure the Pinto is the car that exploded if you hit the back.
Yes, it was. Or is.
It's also the car that they're in Cujo.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the Ford Pinto.
In 1973, in May of 1973, New American Library bought the paperback rights for $400,000, which, in accordance with King's contract with Doubleday, was split between them. Carrie set King's career in motion and became a significant novel in the horror genre. Yeah, that kind of speaks for itself. That's why I mentioned it as a but why though, because without Carrie and honestly without his wife being like, don't be stupid, just keep writing, we really wouldn't have King where he is. Because it just it crashed onto the scene. Like my mom doesn't read a lot of books, but she read horror and like true crime books nonstop, and Carrie was like the first time she had encountered King, obviously, and that one was one of the ones we had in our house.
Obviously, I said I enjoyed the first movie from 1978, I believe what it was.
Yeah, why'd you really like that movie?
Yeah.
Why not?
Duh.
I mean, why did everybody else like the book?
It had everything that Matt loves. John Travolta, people getting bullied, and telekinetic powers.
There's a lot of blood. A lot of people get murdered.
In the 90s version, she like cuts people up with CDs.
Yep, it's real good.
Yeah.
That was the TV one, right?
It might have
'Cause
been.
they
I just
had
remember
a
seeing
main-
it
there
being like,
was
I
a-
get that you're trying to update it, but it was like maybe 2 on the
Yeah,
nose for
there
updating.
was
They had
like a
the
made for
Rage.
TV Carrie.
Yeah.
And then there was Carrie the Rage. And then there's
And that-
2013 Carrie, which is pretty much the old Carrie, but like updated. And it isn't.
Was that long ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while.
The marketing
Wow.
for that one was actually really good. They had like, they rigged cafes. And then they would
Oh, I
have
remember
like
that,
a
yeah.
young girl come in and like throw her hands down, and all the stuff would fly off the shelves, and people like ran. They were terrified.
When do we get to do an episode on just all the crazy marketing ideas that have probably gone too far?
Yeah, that's fair.
Between that one, we talked about in the Mission Impossible episode where they rigged it so much people had to call like bomb squads in because they thought it was going off.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, there was a lot. Or there is a lot. So the next really big piece of writing that I wanted to bring up is the Dark Tower books. I've read the first 2, so I am not like the biggest person on these. But
Yeah.
in the late 1970s, King began what became a series of interconnected stories about a lone gunslinger, Roland, who pursues the Man in Black in an alternate reality universe that is a cross between Tolkien's Middle-earth and the American Wild West, as depicted by Clint Eastwood and Sergio Leone in their spaghetti westerns. The first of these stories, The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger, was initially published in 5 installments by the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction under the editorship of Edward L. Furman from 1975 to 1981, and The Gunslinger was continued as an 8-book epic series called The Dark Tower, whose books King wrote and published infrequently over 4 decades.
Man, I knew a guy in high school who like did not read anything, but he read those books. Like he like wouldn't touch anything else, but whenever I saw him, he had a Dark Tower book with him.
Yeah, my dad loves them. I have read the first one. Not that I didn't like it. It was they're mammoths. They're huge. Which is actually why I haven't read that many Stephen King books, is because you could concuss somebody with all of them.
Yep.
Which is also why people don't like his writing. Then ultimately, one of the other big things that I wanted to bring up, and I didn't title this in the notes. Like I said, Stephen King is known for horror. He is the king of horror, but he also goes into so many different genres. So in 1982, King published Different Seasons, a collection of 4 novellas with a more serious dramatic bent than the horror fiction for which King is famous. The collection is notable for having had 3 of its 4 novellas turned into Hollywood films. The first was Stand By Me, adapted from the novella The Body. Then there was The Shawshank Redemption, which was adapted from the novella Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. And then the last was Apt Pupil, which was adapted from the novella of the same name.
We just know Shawshank Redemption as the movie that apparently lost to Forrest Gump for Best Movie of the Year, and people forget that happened in that year.
Are you bitter about that?
I am not, but it is hilarious.
You sound slightly.
No, it's actually just more funny because a lot of people, when you look at that year, it is a very, like, for how highly rated it ends up being and for how much it's actually talked about, it is a very slept-on movie between, like, Free Willy and Forrest Gump and a bunch of other movies that you're like, wait a minute, these were good compared to this?
Yeah.
I think Free Willy sucks.
It's similarly...
So
We Friday a while ago we did one about like movies that kind of got screwed over in the Oscars, and I don't remember what movies they were, but I want to say it was like American Beauty and The Sixth Sense or something came out in the same year and just kind of swept awards away from literally anybody else.
Yeah.
And so it is just a thing of like, oh, tough break. Like you just happened to come out the wrong year.
Well, I guess if we think about this, what came out the same year as The Two Towers? I know, Return of the King.
I couldn't even
Return of the
tell
King
you.
was the one that swept, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that one kind of destroyed.
Yeah, with 11 Oscars. What else came out that year?
I don't even remember what year that was.
Nobody knows because Tolkien doesn't want you to know.
But yeah, that is, whenever you look at that stuff, it is weird.
I just know that is one of the most talked about things like that I've ever seen and like written about before by a lot of people. Just like how this movie fell so far. Because you ask anybody, like, this movie's great, but then it like nobody in 1994 cared.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that, especially like as we kind of like go through like the works that he's done and like the critically acclaimed movies, the great movies and the works that like people love are all the novellas because they're short.
Because you can actually digest it in a reasonable amount of time.
Yes.
Which I guess is...
I mean, there is something to be said for that, of like making your stories accessible and reasonably lengthed. Not that there's not space creatively or commercially for longer works, but to get a big following, like there's a reason more people have seen the Stanley Kubrick version of The Shining than have read the book probably.
Yeah.
So is this what exactly happened since we were talking about the Dark Tower with the one that was just released probably about a year or so ago?
Yes. Although like I thought that there were plans to turn the Dark Tower into a series, but I think from what I had read was they tried to like put more elements into the first one that didn't fit, and that it just didn't work well.
There's always plans to have 4 movies, but if you don't make any money on your first movie, then you're not going to get your other 3 movies.
Yes.
R.I.P. King Arthur.
I was going to say, what
I was
is
gonna
it,
say Percy-
Allegiant Part 2?
Which one?
Allegiant Part 2. It was the Divergent series last movie was supposed to be a two-parter, and they only did the first one.
I forgot about that.
That's the worst example.
Matt and I
of that.
actually watched all those movies.
So I liked the first one, and then they just get extremely worse. And then that last one, you're like, I don't know if this was worth the investment of me trying to finish this series thing out.
Yeah.
And because it finished halfway through, and then they just like did a TV show or something.
Yeah, because it was so bad. Oh,
Similarly, I just saw a post on I think on Reddit, somebody asking about It, and they bought the 1990s miniseries DVD, and they didn't realize that you have to turn it over, and so they were like, so I don't know, like I got to a scene and like some dude just kills himself in a bathtub, and then it was over.
Oh no, honey.
And everyone was like, oh no, that's not where it ends. Like,
Oh dear.
he's like, I checked the package, there's only one disc.
Oh.
I always think of the Percy Jackson series. I'm still sad that just kind of got scrapped.
Yeah.
That first movie was really fun.
Yes. Then the
So
second
the one
movie kind
thing
of
that
sucks.
I will say is when it comes to like the adaptations and stuff that he's been getting, Netflix and Hulu have been real kind to him because they do give him that format of like studio quality while still allowing him to do multiple things. So 11/22/63 and Castle Rock have both been adapted from his works, and they're both critically acclaimed. And then Netflix has had quite a few movies from his novellas that have come out. Gerald's Game, which is disturbing but really good. But this also has to do with him being able to adapt to the digital age. King really, really, really embraced the internet. unlike a lot of authors at the time. So in 2000, King published online a serialized horror novel called The Plant. At first, the public presumed that King had abandoned the project because sales were unsuccessful, but King later stated that he had simply ran out of stories. And the unfinished epistolary novel is still available from King's official website, now free, so you can go read that. Also, in 2000, he wrote a digital novella, Writing the Bullet, and has said he sees ebooks becoming 50% of the market, probably by 2013 and by 2012 at the time he wrote that. But he also warns, here's the thing, people tire of new toys quickly. So although he really embraced it, he also kind of like, how do you say it? He was cautious, but he wasn't like other writers who refused to sell stuff digitally.
Yeah.
All we learned last
He
episode.
was there to make money while he could.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we did learn last episode that Adrian does not buy books unless they're online.
Yes.
So.
No, I just don't buy dumb books that should just be like a Wikipedia page. This isn't the same thing as, how many people did you kill with a chainsaw in an hour? Like that shouldn't be in a book. I shouldn't have to buy that. Just tell me that fun fact.
That's fair.
Now, if there was like a fun fact thing about Stephen King's books, then no, I probably don't need a book for that. Just give me the Wikipedia for that.
At least Adrian went spooky with his fun facts. I like it.
I thought it was because of the Gears episode.
I thought it was just a blend of both.
You got blended in both, right? You got to bridge the gap. I don't know. How many chainsaw noises do you hear in Stephen King novels? Like, I don't know. That seems like a fact I'd want to read online.
And not in a
not
book.
buy not a $24 book.
Yeah, I'd like to see it in the IMDb trivia section.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's what I need. I don't need a
Oh, okay. Where was I?
In 2003.
So in 2003, King began writing a column on pop culture appearing in Entertainment Weekly. Usually every third week, the column was called The Pop of King, a play on his nickname. He also used to have a printed column called, I think it was something like King, it was like The Garbage Can or something like that, where he just like really leaned into stuff. And then in 2006, King published the apocalyptic novel The Cell. And the book features a sudden force in which every cell phone user turns into a mindless killer. King noted the book's introduction that he does not use cell phones.
So, first of all, can I talk about the fact that, like, do we want to talk about the fact that, like, people actually had columns and they had names and everything? Do those even exist anymore?
They technically do.
They're blogs.
But do they have cool names like The Pop of King?
Yeah, no, I don't. Well, I mean, technically.
No, it's like Scary Mommy.
They're scarefluencers.
Oh, God.
I hate this.
Oh,
That was very good.
They're
though.
scarefluencers.
All right,
That's
we're done with this. Move on. We're not doing this.
So right.
We're not.
And I want to be
How
a
many spooky
scarefluencer.
references? How many spooky references is Kate gonna make this month and next month
And the following month?
and the following month?
Oh man, I can't wait for October.
Oh yeah, this is where we should plug the month of Alex, in which we will be doing all scary things, and Alex will be coming on every episode that month. And Adrian will
gonna be a blast.
have the option of being here or not.
Honestly, I get it, Adrian. If it's not your thing, it's super not your thing.
And Matt will be here to just ride this out, like ride the bullet.
So I included that fact in there just because, like, even though King was totally on board with the digital age, he does not use cell phones. Although he uses Twitter now, and Stephen King's actually really great to follow because he has a corgi whose name is The Thing of Evil. And so he just posts cute corgi pictures that says the thing of evil is waiting to take my soul, and it's just like the thing of evil like begging for his food.
Oh, I love that.
So one, do we know if he actually uses a cell phone now? Because it's been about 13 years.
Yeah, no idea.
I will say I had a friend like that refused
I'll
to.
try and figure it out. I'll look. 'Cause I'm also curious. Like, it's 2019, dude. Like,
So
you're on Twitter. Do you mean like you only tweet from your computer? Like, that's it?
I
It
mean,
could be.
yeah. He hasn't that much money. He doesn't have to leave
His
his
typewriter
computer. I mean,
Yeah, I guess it's Trace. You don't people. But how do people get a hold of it? Does he have like?
maybe I don't want
I
to
don't
talk to
know.
anybody.
I'm a look.
I mean, assistance.
Yeah. I do. I had speaking of cell phones, I had a friend who was like that and refused to buy a cell phone, and like we were like, this is probably like 2008 years now, like in 2008, about the same time, a little after this, and he refused to have a cell phone until his job like forced him to have a cell phone, and they like actually bought him one. And then he like after about a week of finally having a cell phone, he actually locked himself out of his car keys on the side of the road, and he had to use his cell phone for like the first time ever. And he was like, "I hate all of you because I've never done this in my life, and now I have a cell phone, and now you're forcing me to have to use this cell phone and justifying me having this cell phone."
Terrible.
The convenience and the injustice,
So there's a 2018 post from Reddit that asks this exact question: does Stephen King still not use a cell phone? And one of the comments says, "Unless Tabitha is taking all the pictures of Molly, it's pretty safe to think that he does have a cell phone."
I would
This seems
agree.
like a lot of work, right?
That's
Like,
fair.
I would agree, but then again, we do hang out with people who take photos from their actual cameras, and you'll be surprised how fast you can just upload them and transfer them real fast, whether it be a
Yeah,
cell
that is
phone
real
or
true.
something else.
it just seems like so much more work. And like, isn't he a busy man? Isn't he writing 2,000 words a day?
I
Does
mean,
he really have that time to transfer stuff over instead of just taking it with his phone?
I have no idea. Maybe maybe he still has, maybe he just has like a camera and it's like in airplane mode all the time, or cell phone, it's just in airplane mode.
I don't know,
Just doesn't
but
want to turn into a mindless killer.
I'm gonna take this real quick so all of you can see Molly, aka the Thing of Evil.
I've seen this.
Molly, aka the Thing of Evil, and Yoshi, aka the Thing of Good, await arrival of Joe Hill's corgi. The Thing of Hey Bro, what's happening? Adorable. Joe Hill's his son, by the way, which we'll get into later. But yeah, so all that is to say is Stephen King has definitely taken advantage of the digital age, and especially when Kindle was coming out and the early advent of digital books. In 2009, King published a novella written exclusively for the launch of the second generation Amazon Kindle and available only on Amazon.com. And Throttle, a novel co-written with his son Joe Hill, and was released later as an audiobook titled Road Rage, which included Richard Matheson's short story Duel. So I'm going to include this next part, which is actually real sad, but it's because this was probably one of the most impactful moments of King's life on his work, and that is his car accident. So, or it's not his car accident. Okay, I'll explain.
Are we talking about Maximum Overdrive?
Huh?
Maximum Overdrive? Do you know about this?
No.
You don't? Okay, so Stephen King wrote and directed a coke-fueled movie in the 80s about all technology trying to kill people, and it takes place at a truck stop.
Oh, yeah, I don't.
And I think it has Emilio Estevez or something in it.
I'm not surprised. Oh, yeah. Okay. I looked up
Yeah, it's a lot.
it has the Green Goblin thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh dear. Yeah. Thought Christine
Yeah.
was bad. Christine's
But now
movie
the
about
actual Stephen King car accident.
yeah, so in 1999 at around 4:30, King was walking on the shoulder of a Maine State Route 5 in Lovell, Maine. Driver Brian Edward Smith, distracted by an unrestrained dog moving in the back of his minivan, struck King, who landed in a depression in the ground about 14 feet from the pavement. According to Oxford County Sheriff Deputy Matt Baker, King was hit from behind, and some witnesses said the driver was not speeding, reckless, or drinking. In his book On Writing, which is one of his nonfiction books where he talks about writing, King states he was heading north, walking against traffic. Shortly before the accident took place, a woman in a car, also northbound, passed King first, and then the light blue Dodge van. The van was looping from one side of the road to the other, and the woman told her passenger she hoped that guy in the van doesn't hit him. King was conscious enough to give the deputy phone numbers to contact his family, but was in considerable pain. He was transported to Northern Cumberland Hospital in Bradenton and then flown by air ambulance to Central Maine Medical Center in Lewiston. After 5 operations and 10 days in physical therapy, King resumed work on writing in July, though his hip was still shattered and he could only sit for about 40 minutes before the pain became unbearable. King's lawyer and 2 others purchased Smith's van for $1,500, reportedly to prevent it from appearing on eBay. Fun fact, Stephen King, being the morbid person that he was, actually wanted to have a charity event in which he sold tickets to essentially hit that car with a sledgehammer and then donated the money to charity.
That's so good. I love that.
They didn't do that. It was just crushed in a junkyard, sadly.
Oh.
His PR
That's
people said he
like,
couldn't do it.
Who doesn't love a good old car bash?
Yeah, like his PR people said he couldn't do it. And
Why?
He was like, but it hurt me. Like
Yeah, how is that bad
Yes.
PR? That's so good.
no idea.
I don't get it. That's dumb.
You could do that for
It
about
really
$150 a day. Don't act like people wouldn't pay $150 to smash a sledgehammer.
Oh, I totally would, because when he got into this accident, people were terrified. Mainly because he hadn't finished the Dark Tower. And they were real frustrated, and that was the first thing they thought of. But also, like, at this point in 1989, everybody has become familiar with his work, and he had already become a household name.
Oh yeah.
So in 2002, King actually announced that he would stop writing, apparently motivated in part by frustration with his injuries, which had made sitting uncomfortable and reduced his stamina. He's since resumed writing. In shock to no one, the man writes 2,000 words a day. But states on his website, I'm writing at a much slower pace than previously, and I think that if I come up with something really, really good, I would be perfectly willing to publish it, because that still feels like the final act of the creative process. Publishing it so people can read it, and you can get their feedback, and people can talk about it with each other and with you, the writer, but the force of my invention has slowed down a lot over the years, and that's as it should be. So ultimately, this brings us to the next but why though, which is his writing. King's formula for learning to write well is read and write 4 to 6 hours a day. If you cannot find that time for that, you can't expect to be a good writer. He sets out each day with a quota of 2,000 words and will not stop writing unless it is met. He also has a simple definition for talent in writing. If you wrote something for which someone sent you a check, if you cashed the check and it didn't bounce, and if you paid the light bill with the money, I consider you talented.
I mean, seems
Not
valid.
wrong.
Yep.
Shortly after his car
It's a
accident,
good rule.
Shortly after his car accident, King wrote the first draft for the book Dreamcatcher with a notebook and a Waterman fountain pen, which he called the world's finest word processor. The pen, not him. And people hate Dreamcatcher, both the movie and the book. So he was like real hopped up on drugs.
Yeah, that sounds like just even the title. I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of that. That
Really?
just sounds like some trippy
I remember everybody
craziness.
hating it. That was
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah, because I'm trying to think, because my grandma had all of his books. I can't even remember seeing this one on her cabinet.
Yeah, this was in
Where she kept all these.
2003. The movie.
That looks awesome.
Secret Window is also terrible.
So did they just find Thomas
didn't like
Jane
that
for
one?
everything?
No, I did not. What'd you say, Matt?
So did
I thought
Matt?
I was gonna say, did we just find Thomas Jane for all of his movies?
C. What'd you say, Alex?
I was just gonna say Secret Window, like it was like plenty predictable and dumb and ridiculous, but I thought it was like fun enough to watch, but I also haven't seen it since I was in high school.
That's the problem with Stephen King stuff. You watch it when you're young, it pulls you in, and then you go back to watch it, and it's not that great. Except for Pet Sematary. I rewatch Pet Sematary every October. It's on my 31 days of Halloween or 31 days of horror every year, and it's because it's great. And Mary Lambert is amazing.
So this year, are you gonna watch the remake, or are you gonna stick to the original?
Stick to the original. If not, if I would love to do a double, like a double feature of both. But it's nothing against the Starry guys, but the original still holds, and you get to see, get to see Stephen King as a priest. He like
That's
he
very good.
oversees Gage's ceremony.
Yeah,
Not ceremony.
he does
funeral.
cameos a decent bit, I feel like, right?
Yeah. He does them in almost everything.
Just like, yeah, I can pop in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's in It Chapter 2. He wasn't in Chapter 1 though, was he?
I don't remember. I also didn't like It
Okay.
Chapter 1, so I push a lot of it out of my memory.
She blocked it out
That's
of her
fair.
memory.
Yeah, I don't remember him being in Chapter 1, but yeah, in Chapter 2, he like owns like an antique store and is just kind of like in for 5 seconds.
I feel like Stephen King should own a haunted goods store where he just buys people's cursed objects and sells it to people. I feel like that's where he should be in life.
So basically, you want to take the show Oddities, but you want to give it to Stephen King.
Yes.
Okay.
Or me. It could be me or Stephen King. Just saying.
I don't know if you want some of those oddities, if you've ever seen that show.
Did you see what made me excited when we were antiquing with your mom?
Have you ever watched the show Oddities?
Yes.
Okay.
Where was I?
After Dreamcatchers.
Yes. So when asked why he writes, King responded, "The answer to that is fairly simple. There was nothing else I was made to do. I was made to write stories, and I love to write stories. That's why I do it. I really can't imagine doing anything else, and I can't imagine doing what I do." He is also often asked why he writes such terrifying stories, and his answers this with another question: "Why do you assume I have a choice?" King usually begins.
That's a good response, but so weird.
It's real weird. I mean, I read you some of his history. He's been through some dark shit, or he's been through some dark stuff. Also, add in the fact that he has suffered from both substance abuse and alcoholism. Like Stephen King was literally Jack Torrance for a bit.
We talk about this
Yeah.
on multiple episodes again. To be a great writer, you have to see some stuff.
Yeah.
Because Tolkien went through war. We talked about that.
Yeah, it's all rooted in like either terrible. I mean, the writers that I like have very traumatic lives, and they turn that pain into like good things.
Good things.
The Shining is a good thing. But yeah, why do you assume I have a choice? That's what I should do when people ask me why I keep posting the illustrations from scary stories. Why do you assume I have a choice?
Not wrong.
King
It's a good answer.
King usually begins a story creation process by imagining a what-if scenario, such as what would happen if a writer is kidnapped by a sadistic nurse in Colorado. What story is that, guys?
Misery.
Yes.
It's
Which
great.
I'll find it and link it in the show notes. But a theater troupe did a stage play of Misery in which they promoted it by having the character that Kathy Bates plays go into a Barnes and Noble and have that breakdown looking for the author's work from Misery, and people reposted it online saying, "This is terrible, how dare she act this way?" And Stephen King fans were like, that's from a movie, which is from a book. So
I'm a personal fan of Family Guy's episode where they parody this.
it's real good.
With Brian and Stewie.
It's real good.
It is good.
I will say Kathy Bates
also
is
the-
amazing in that movie.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say the Family Guy episode where they make fun of Stephen King, and he's like sitting in his editor's office, is like, "There's a couple going to a hotel in Maine, and they're attacked by a lamp," and he like grabs the lamp off the desk and is like, "Ah!" The guy's like, "Are you out of ideas?"
Yeah.
King often uses authors as characters or includes mention of fictional books in his stories, novellas, and novels, such as Paul Sheldon, who's the main character in Misery, about adult Bill Denborough in It, Ben Mears in Salem's Lot, and Jack Torrance in The Shining. He has extended this to breaking the fourth wall by also including himself as a character in the Dark Tower series from Wolves of the Calla onwards. See also list of fictional books. I'm not going to do that because that's a Wikipedia thing. So the next but one I want to talk about is imposter syndrome, because everybody feels it. Stephen King felt it so much that he decided to to publish articles in the late 70s to early 80s under a different name, which is Richard Bachman. He published Rage, The Long Walk, Roadwork, The Running Man, and Thinner, all under this name. And the idea behind it was to test whether he could replicate his success again and to allay his fears that his popularity was an accident.
I mean, statistically speaking, he's not wrong in a sense, so it's probably not a bad idea to try.
Yeah. And then an alternate telling of this is that publishing standards at the time only allowed one book per year, and King wanted to do more. But the fact that he picked up the name from a hard rock band, Bachman Turner Overdrive, of which he's a fan, and the fact of like what he published during that time, a lot of people stick with the first explanation. And that's the one that he's given himself. Richard Bachman was exposed as King's pseudonym by a persistent Washington, D.C. bookstore clerk, Steve Brown, who noticed similarities between the works and later located publishers' records at the Library of Congress that named King as the author of one of Bachman's novels. This led to a press release heralding Bachman's death, supposedly from cancer of the pseudonym. In 1989, King dedicated his book, The Dark Half, about a pseudonym turning on a writer, to the deceased Richard Bachman. And in 1996, when Stephen King's novel Desperation was released, the compilation novel The Regulators carried the Bachman byline. In 2006, during a press conference, King declared that he had discovered another Bachman novel titled Blaze. It was published in 2007, and in fact, the original manuscript had been held at King's alma mater, the University of Maine in Orono, for many years and had been covered by numerous King experts. King rewrote the original 1973 manuscript for its publication. He also used other pseudonyms like John Swifton, and he also had his other pseudonym, Beryl Evans, was for his children's book called Charlie the Choo Choo, from the World of the Dark Tower, was published under that.
So is this an actual children's book, or is this like a
It's a children's book within the world. Yeah, but it is.
Because, I mean, you could argue, like, Chapter 1's a children's book, because there's children in it.
That's not how classification works.
No, Matt. No.
Yeah,
like Moby Dick isn't a science textbook.
But
It's
about
not
whales.
a whaling book.
I mean, they do whaling.
There's also a lot about whales in it, but it's all wildly inaccurate and has been, disproven by science at this point.
And so finally, one of the last but why those is that he is...
That is terrifying. What kid is reading that shit?
Like, that's not Thomas the Choo Choo Train. I'm
going to ask this question again. Was this actually a children's book?
Charlie the Choo Choo's thinking, I think I can kill these kids.
Are you
kidding
me?
That's what he's thinking.
Thomas the Tank Engine is also terrifying to look at.
Not as terrifying as that.
Nah. Yeah, no. Like he's trying to murder them kids.
Do you remember some of the things that showed up in Thomas the Tank Engine?
I remember people did some stuff to make it look messed up, but I don't think the actual show was as messed up. That picture right there is terrifying. What's so terrifying about that?
The second one.
Did you see the first one? Charlie is going to murder them kids.
He's going to murder them, and he's going to smile while he does it.
How is this not as creepy?
Because he thinks he can. That's why.
He just looks like an angry poor Choo Choo. This other one goes like, I'm murdering these kids and I might eat them.
This isn't it.
I mean, I don't know, man. There's, then you have like the little engine that could, like they could like all just get in like a brawl, like, Twisted Metal
Alex,
style.
what do you feel about this?
I still think Charlie the Choo Choo Train would wreck both of them. He's much scarier.
That's fair. No, I feel like this looks, by the cover, like it falls into that category of kids' books for adults.
What is that second
Yeah,
photo?
that's what I have to say about that.
Okay.
What is
Well,
that clown on there doing? That clown looks like he's about to hop off and murder somebody.
Come on, man. That's a little engine that could, man. He's just trying his best.
Sure. Okay. Moving on.
anyway. So yeah, the next but why though is probably the biggest one that I have been referencing consistently. He is the king of horror. Yes, it's also a pun on his name.
I thought he was the
So,
pop of king.
huh?
Thought he was the pop of king.
He's also the king of horror. So he wrote what is it? So he wrote a comic book for DC Comics called American Vampire, which was a monthly comic book series written by King with short story writer Scott Snyder. The reason this is really important is currently Scott Snyder is a really big author in comics. Specifically, he's doing Batman, the Batman Who Laughs, which is like pure horror. And a lot of that he credits to like working with King and stuff like that. Ultimately, he's become the inspiration for many horror writers. One of the biggest things that King does in his work is that he centers trauma, including his trauma and that of those around him, into his work. And it's what has pretty much made his stories resonate. Whether it's his drinking problems, substance abuse, his childhood friend who got hit by a train, his car accident. There are threads of his life that continually come into all of his work. And I think one of the biggest things to kind of note is, as much as it is a story about kids fighting a murderous clown, none of those kids have a good home life, like at all. Like all of the kids are actively fighting and trying to survive their own personal traumas. And it's one of the readings that a lot of people have given to the book is that those personal traumas are what culminate in Pennywise. And ultimately needing to defeat Pennywise is needing to essentially defeat the trauma to come out the other end. And if you don't do that effectively, it ends up staying with you for your entire life, which happens with the Losers Club. But that is one of the biggest things about his work and why it's really resonated with a lot of people. That's also one of the ways that I read Pet Sematary, and especially the newest one that came out. It's an entire way of processing grief, and especially processing grief of somebody who shouldn't have died. And that the fact that King plays with all of this is why his work, even when it's 800 pages long, sticks with people. There's a really good, I need to get her last name. There's a really good article from Alicia Grosso on Atom Tickets, which the title of which is How Stephen King Prepared Me for the Constant Hurt of Living in the World. And a lot of this is just because Stephen King puts all of his characters through the ringer. You either end up coming into a story where they are already completely hurt and dealing with that trauma, or you're coming into a story in which that stuff develops over time. But all of his people get hurt terribly. And this is ultimately why we like adapting his works, which really is one of the reasons why he's the king of horror as well. He is the number one living author with the most film adaptations based on theater releases. This doesn't count all the TV adaptations or his original works that were directly made for TV and movies. And he is 34. And if you look at it, nobody even gets close. Nicholas Sparks is at 11. And that is just currently. When I counted...
How do we get them to write a book together?
Huh?
How do we get them to write a book together?
Oh, dear. Please, no.
I just need to know what that monster is like.
Oh, no. No. We can't. When I counted it up, and this may be a little off, but he has 96 total adaptations across TV, film, and episodes based on his work. And from 2011, he's not included as the most adapted authors. He doesn't crack the top 40 list, but given all of the stuff that has been greenlit for Netflix and everything, he's going to be getting there within the next couple of years. When you look at the top 24, technically like more than that, because people some people tied with numbers. He can come into the top 25 if he reaches 102. So when you look at the most adapted, shock to no one, William Shakespeare at 831. Then you have Anton Chekhov at 320, Charles Dickens at 300, Alexander Dumas 243, and Edgar Allan Poe at 240.
So basically, we thought just a bunch of old people that died a long time ago. So all we need to have is to go about 200 years in the future, and
yeah,
he's going to be up there.
Oh wait, actually no, he is on this list. Why does this have 127 people? Yeah, no, he's 18 on this list as of 2011. At 127. There we go. But also, in 200 years, he will reach William Shakespeare at 831.
They'll be on the remake of It for the 18th time.
Yes.
Like we have.
Eventually, they're just gonna make a Boyhood version of it, where they wait 27 years to make part 2.
Yeah. But yeah, so if you are a Patreon patron, you get access to our show notes, and you can see all of these links that have all of their works. But yeah, so he's the most adapted living person, and he's well on his way to become one of the most adapted writers ever. In his book, The Philosophy of Horror, that came out in 1990, Noel Carroll discusses King's work as an exemplar of modern horror fiction, analyzing both the narrative structure of King's fiction and King's nonfiction work on the art and craft of writing. Carroll writes that for King, the horror stories is always a contest between the normal and the abnormal, such that the normal is reinstated and therefore affirmed. In his analysis of post-World War II horror fiction, The Modern Weird Tale, critic S.T. Joshi devotes an entire chapter, to King's work. Joshi argues that King's best-known works, his supernatural novels, are his worst, describing them as the mostly bloated, illogical, maudlin, and prone to Deus Machina endings. But despite these criticisms, Gerald argues that since Gerald's Game, which came out in 1993, King has been tempering the worst of his writing faults and producing books that are leaner, more believable, and generally better written.
That's some good praise, yeah.
In a short story collection, A Century of Great Suspense Stories, editor Jeffrey Denver noted that King single-handedly made popular fiction grow up. While there were many good best-selling writers before him, King, more than anybody since John D. McMillan, brought reality to genre novels. And while King's popularity has driven some to shun his work, he does have a lot of writing faults, namely his really long books. He puts out a lot of content, and when you put out as much content as Stephen King, you're bound to have a lot of hits. But he's also acknowledged a lot of his writing faults and a lot of his success, and he has self-described his work as the Big Mac of authors. Because it's just real accessible and real out there, and it's everywhere. But personally, as a fan, I love Stephen King, but I don't necessarily love all of his writing. I picked up it to buy it and read it, but that thing was like 800 pages, and I was like, I'm probably not going to read this. I'm going to put this back. So, yeah.
I mean, that feels reasonable. Also, I'm just piecing together now, like, the two big faults he's known for are really, really long books and bad endings, and maybe that's part of what people don't enjoy about it so much is, like, I sunk a ton of time into no payoff.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, we've talked
like, when you combine those two bad habits, yeah, that really sucks.
Yeah, because we've talked about before. You can, as long as your ending's great, you can, absolve a lot of your faults in the beginning. Because that'll be your lasting memory. Versus if your lasting memory is, this ending sucked, that's all you remember.
Yeah, if I get to the end of 800 pages and just think, wait, that's how it ends, that's it, I'm not going to have fond memories of that book.
Yeah, I mean, if my first 200 pages can suck, but those last, 200 are great, then we don't remember those first 200.
Yeah.
Matt with wisdom.
One, just how memory works, but I think that obviously, we talk about it all the time. Obviously, we don't really do a lot of books on here, but we talk about author stuff, but I think it happens in movies a lot. and even TV shows. If you do not nail your ending, regardless of a lot of stuff, people are going
That's
to
why
remember.
a lot of people forget Doctor Strange happened, because that ending is so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Third acts matter, but why though?
I mean, they really do. I mean, you can make or break a movie in your third act. Even if the first stuff sucks, the third act is good. People still say, "Oh, this is a great movie," which has been another problem. People
Right? And yeah, and nowhere is that more true than in horror. When like the third act goes off the rails and is just really bad, like that happens all the time with scary movies.
Yep.
Once,
Which is what do we talk about with Scream? We talk about the very last part of Scream.
yeah,
Not that the first parts weren't, good, but like
No, you talk about that opening scene a
he
lot.
called about
True.
the
And
cold
also,
open.
yes,
true, but everybody remembers the end.
I don't think Scream.
Yes, that's true.
It's true, but I also don't think Scream is a good example, just because like the entire middle section and the start of the. Well, I guess that could be true, because the third act starts when he gives the breakdown of horror movies, and you end up lining up with Tatum's death at the party.
Oh, right,
So that
yeah.
would technically be the mark of the third act, the house party.
As a person who doesn't really watch that movie and has only seen it a few times, I remember the third act more than anything else.
We're going to be watching that movie for our first community horror night on September 29th. Join our Discord.
Nice. And then yeah, come back for that that discussion.
Yes. Also, it's a really accessible movie. Just putting it out there. If you don't like horror, Scream is actually not bad to watch, because it's meta. Adrian, come join us.
Maybe. Yeah, I'll be very selective on the ones that I come.
I tried to not pick scary ones. I wanted to accommodate like horror light.
She means to say the pansies of the world, as myself.
It means to
So
say,
don't watch Raw.
It means to say I want this to succeed. So I chose some really easy ones in the beginning.
I watched a trailer for Raw, and I was like,
No, I had a hard
not for
time
me.
with Raw. I had
Not
to
for me.
turn away from the TV in Raw, and that should tell you something.
"Oh, that
Yeah,
trailer
that movie's rough.
It's real rough.
The trailer was rough. Jesus, I don't even."
But here's the thing, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was such a good movie. I don't know how soon I need to see it again, but it was really good.
I've seen it twice, because I thought to myself, oh yeah, it sucked. I mean, it was great the first time, but I turned around for it. I'll definitely be able to watch it this time now that I know what's happening. No, that's not the case. Like,
Yeah, but I mean,
At
I can
all.
go back and rewatch like Stephen King stuff, like because it scared the what Jesus had me when I was a kid. Like we had a lot of storm drains. I didn't go near storm drains. for a
Oh
very
yeah,
long
that'll
time.
mess you up.
yeah.
I remember like sitting there after watching because it was like on Fox or something like that in the middle of the day, and I just like sat there and was like, "What did I just watch? Like, why did I do this? I could have just walked away. Like, I didn't have to watch this movie."
I did not take a shower for 2 weeks as a kid because I was so afraid.
Yeah, and Cujo didn't make me scared of dogs, but I was just like, "Dude, what if my dog gets rabies? Like, I don't want to have to shoot my dog. Like, I don't want that."
I saw Old Yeller
my life.
first, so we were good.
Oh God! But for
Yeah, I did see a lot before, but big ass Saint Bernard scarier than Old Yeller, unfortunately.
So to put in perspective, the first one is Scream. The second one's Train to Busan, which is a zombie movie. Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Holidays, which is an anthology film. I think those are all fairly
Yeah, those
close.
are light.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the last thing I do want to end on is Stephen King's activism and his philanthropy. So in 2008, King actually spoke out against HB 1423, which was a bill pending in the Massachusetts state legislature that would restrict or ban the sale of violent video games to anyone under the age of 18. King argued that such laws allow legislators to ignore the economic divide between the rich and poor and the easy accessibility of guns, which he believed were the actual causes of the violence. He also paired that with a nonfiction essay that he wrote and published, which was directly after Sandy Hook, where he critiqued all of the U.S. On the brighter note, King has stated that he donates approximately $4 million a year to libraries, local fire department and local fire departments that need updated life-saving equipment, i.e. the Jaws of Life, schools, or a scattering of organizations that underwrite the arts. He also established the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation, which is chaired by him and his wife, which ranks sixth among main charities in terms of average annual giving, with over 2.8 million in grants given away per year, according to the Grantmanship Center. And in 2011, the STK Foundation donated $70,000 in matched funding via his radio station to help pay for the heating bills of families in need in his hometown of Bangor, Maine during the winter. So he's a rich dude who, as much as Alex said, he has that FU money, he does give a lot of it back, while also paying networks to show his very long made-for-television movies.
I do remember the 2008 thing. That was very interesting, and yeah.
And we're still having that conversation.
Yeah. But I do remember when that happened, and it seemed to be a giant, huge ordeal, which was crazy because, like I said, it just is an author who spoke out and everybody think, but it was a huge ordeal.
Yeah. So Stephen King has won, over 100 awards for all of his work. I have a picture of it. I'm just going to include it in the show notes because I'm not going to read all of these since we're low on time. But one of the lasting things is his legacy. There are, let me check. There are currently 3 adaptations of his works coming to Apple TV, HBO, and CBS in 2020 alone. He is not going anywhere,
Wow.
and his work is not going anywhere. And I would be remiss not to add Joe Hill. So Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, who refuses to use King's name so he can make it on his own as a horror author. But Joe Hill is one of the leading horror writers in comics right now as well. And he is also having a big coming out, essentially, with adaptations of his works. Most recently, Nosferatu on AMC, which you can find all of those reviews for each episode on our site, butwhythopodcast.com. And there's no signs of slowing there either. That obviously Joe Hill has his own legacy that he's creating, but
How did he come up with the last name Hill?
I don't know. This wasn't a Joe Hill episode.
Bobby.
Okay.
I will look it up though, because now I'm. Oh my God, he looks just like his dad.
So they do actually have a nice relationship, correct?
No, they love each other.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, no, they have a great relationship. It was just when Joe Hill started writing, he didn't want to take any of the spotlight that his dad had already put on him, because they knew because he came in as a comic book writer and he's expanded since then. There's a really, people don't like it. I liked it. Horns, it's on Netflix right now. That's adapted from one of his novels. But Joe Hill and his father do a lot of stuff together. They work on a lot of stuff together. But he just really wanted to make it on his own. He didn't want to deal with any of the, oh, you got here because you're Stephen King's son. Because he never wanted his stuff to be taken into question. Like, he wanted to succeed on his own merit. And his name, Joe Hill, is because his middle name is Hillstrom.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So that's how he came up with it. But yeah, that's.
Well, his dad's gonna have to start hitting with cars and stuff here pretty soon. Needs to catch up.
Need to add some trauma.
Yeah, he needs some trauma in his life.
I mean, his dad was an alcoholic and a substance abuser, so.
I'm just kidding. All right.
But yeah, that's it. Any last thoughts? Final thoughts?
I guess final thought.
Yeah.
Oh.
Alex, you're last. Remember.
Yeah. I thought Alex was.
Oh, right. Okay.
Wait, he has another kid, Owen King.
Yeah.
Is he important?
No idea.
No.
I've never heard of him.
Yeah.
Take this as no.
Oh, well,
As far as my
he's also a writer, but sorry, Matt. I just didn't know he had another son. I thought he only had the one.
Yeah. As far as final thoughts, obviously he's done a lot of stuff. pulling an Adrian, and I don't read books. Definitely not gonna sit for 800
Why
pages.
did you give Adrian that voice?
I don't know. Why not?
Also, like, what was the last book you read, Matt? I guarantee you I've read more books than you lately.
Probably.
This doesn't have to go in the episode, but I read books. Stop making it seem like I'm a dumb person that doesn't read books.
I don't
Sorry,
read
I don't want
books.
to buy the video game encyclopedia for Guinness Book of World Records. That's a stupid book to buy. Give me that in a Wikipedia page.
I don't buy books. So, like
Oh,
Adrian,
wait,
I don't
so-
buy books.
Oh, I forgot to say, Doctor Sleep is coming out this year, which looks really good. It's the sequel to The Shining, which came out in 2013 as a book. It's that I have read. It is crazy. Like, there's like psychic energy stealing vampires that come for this kid, and it's insane. Not like the
Here's the
Shining.
thing. That sentence doesn't make it sound good, but I've seen the trailer and I know what you mean, and it actually does look really good.
Now,
But
Matt.
the phrase "psychic energy vampires."
Now, Matt. Back to your insulting Adrian.
So for the third time, my final thoughts are, obviously I've seen a lot of his works and movies, and like Adrian, I don't read books, or buy books, I guess would be a better question. Or better statement. One of the two. See, we don't know. If I read enough books, I would know the difference. But no, I do know he has a lot of good stuff. It's interesting. I know a lot of these are horror. I've not seen a lot, but I've actually, when I went down this list, I've actually seen quite a bit of his horror movies, or like adaptation movies, or whatever you want to say. And I probably enjoy them more than I do some of the other ones. Like, I know Salem's Lot's great or whatever, but I don't care to watch that movie. I hate watching that damn movie. Is it?
It's also a mini series.
Nobody cares about that one.
Yes, they do. That's actually a good one.
No, it's not.
Did you watch it? You can't say that if you haven't watched it.
I don't need to watch it to know that was bad. It's like when they made Salem Lot 2. You remember that happened?
No.
That was the thing.
That happened. Is that good too? It wasn't.
No, but 1408's good.
Yeah. But either way, I know obviously his importance. I know that a lot of people enjoy his reading, and I do think, like, as we mentioned, the top, like, writers, like, we bring up William Shakespeare, which is about what I was expecting. We just got to give it time before he catches up on that list, and depending on, I guess, how far we actually make it in time, he probably could someday. Oh, maybe not, just because people keep playing, like, Romeo and Juliet. They're, like, on adaptation, like, 200 at this point. So, but he'll probably get up there eventually. And it'll be interesting. He probably owns the state of Maine. Will probably be the lasting effect. I'm waiting for them to change it to the Stephen King state.
So they apparently also don't like him weighing in on elections because he has so much pull.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I've been to Maine. There's more trees than people, obviously. But, yeah, that's all I got. I don't really... I had a flow, and then it got interrupted, and then it didn't flow, and then I got interrupted again, and now I'm just kind of throwing it together.
Well, if you hadn't given Adrian a hick accent when you said, I don't read books.
Yeah. Why do I get a hick accent for? That's mean.
That's fair.
You know what a
But also,
biome
now that
is,
you've said
Adrian?
it, what I'm... Well, we're back to this.
Yeah. I'm out. I'm out of here. SpongeBob.
No,
meme.
I want Maine to put out black license plates with cat eyes on it that say the Stephen King state.
Yes.
Ooh.
See?
Now
Yes.
that Matt has used the phrase the Stephen King state.
Yes. Yes.
Let's do
Or like a red balloon, just a single red balloon in the center.
I want it so bad.
I mean, at this point, Maine might as well just accept it and roll with it.
Just really lean into it.
Get that government funding money off of just people buying Stephen King merchandise.
Let's do it. Inspire his next book.
Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, my grandma had all of his books while she was still alive, and I know that, later in her life, she was kind of, like, disappointed, like, with this thing, so I wish she was still around to kind of see him kind of go back up to kind of where he was. But I just remember always when I would walk into her office and, like, if this bookshelf falls, like, I'm dead, because those books are ridiculous, and... I don't know how she just kept reading them and just reading them over and over and over again. But like, I don't watch any of the horror movies, but I do appreciate like a lot of his other adaptations that I guess I didn't really attribute them to Stephen King because I always think about him the king of like the king of horror or whatever. But Shawshank, Stand by Me are really really great. I guess the Green Mile's horror. I guess like the movie.
Is it
The movie
horror?
has some horror stuff in it. I don't know. Kind of. I don't know. Some weird stuff happens in it. Maybe I don't know. But like stuff like that. Like I like his non-horror stuff too, which is kind of to my point. Which is why I will follow stuff, and I will kind of wish he did like more stuff like that, like he did in the his early part of his career. Because it seems like he's just doing like a lot of horror stuff. Is that what I'm getting at a lot of this, and hasn't done like a coming of age story that's not about kids getting eaten by a clown, or give him a dog movie that doesn't have a killer dog. I'd watch it probably, but I am excited to see Kate's takes on the second It and whether or not her and Alex agree on it. So next time Alex is here, we can talk about that again.
I love Stephen King, but through the course of like prepping for this episode and talking through it, I actually enjoy the adaptations of Stephen King's work a lot more. Because I do think that they refine the heart of what he does by taking out all of the unnecessary stuff, or the stuff that kind of weights it down. But it is funny that like Stephen King loves the TV movie, hates Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which is like, I would argue like the best horror movie of all time. That is, when I think of the things that scare me the most, they all come from Stephen King. When I think of like the scares that happened in my formative years, they all come from Stephen King. Like It, or Gage slashing the Achilles tendon on the guy.
Yep.
Because after we watched Pet Sematary, my cousin hid under the bed and grabbed my ankle.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No.
It was terrifying, and I cried for like a solid hour. So I would like run and jump on the bed for a very large portion of my young life.
Well, that's how you avoid the monsters.
Yes.
That's not nonsense.
Exactly. Again, I didn't shower for like 2 weeks after watching it, and my mom had to literally pick me up and carry me to the restroom to make me shower, in which I cried the entire time. I'm deeply afraid of clowns. I don't like them. And 3 years ago, I fell asleep watching The Shining, and Matt can attest, I woke up sweating and screaming because I was having a dream about it. It was bad.
Yeah, it's rough.
So yeah, I would say that there is something about his work, and I think a lot of it has to do with the trauma that gets in your mind when you watch it and sticks with you. As much as the imagery is scary, I do think that there are also larger themes, and it's also those larger things that keep me coming back to them, and I'm really excited for Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, for sure.
Now it's your turn, Alex.
I think I just think something with Stephen King that's noteworthy is not necessarily how long his books are or how many he's written, but specifically kind of just what he's contributed and enabled to the horror community at large, where it's not just about him writing these stories for people to digest, but for other people to step into and play with and try to recreate, for filmmakers, directors, actors, cinematographers, like all of those people to get to take a crack at bringing to life, whether it is the hotel from The Shining or Pennywise in It. Like all of these people get to like take attempts at telling these stories. And I think that he has done a lot to kind of continue to inspire people to dabble in horror, to approach his books, to see what it's all about, and to, I don't want to say normalize it, but kind of almost in a way.
Yeah.
And to really like, I guess, inspire people to continue making these stories and making these movies and putting it out there. Like, he just has done so much, and whether or not you like his writing or his endings, those endings can always be retouched. They can always, be adjusted, and people do so when they adapt it, like with The Shining. for better and for worse. And I just think that, yeah, something that's important is just that so many other people have had opportunities to play creatively and to contribute to this genre and to art in general.
So I do think you're right when you think about popular horror. I mean, when you think about theater horror and popular horror before this like kind of renaissance of the horror that
Yes.
we're having now, it was Stephen King titles.
Yeah. And he's very much kind of like a gateway for people, both as consumers and creators, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right on the money. It's almost like it was a good idea bringing you on this episode.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so Alex, why don't you tell people where they can listen to you, talk with you, do all the internet things.
Yes, so Friday.com for genre news and reviews. That's kind of like my main place for horror, but also I am on Twitter at MostAlwaysAlex, and I am always happy to talk about horror movies there. And Game Boys Co-op, we don't do horror there a lot, but it doesn't never come up. So that would be a good one to check out. And I think that's it.
And then
you feel so lost. You feel so lost without your other podcast. You just sound. You can hear it.
It's just weird to not do it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you're not like lost, but you can tell that you're like, wait, I don't do that one. Hold on, I gotta get my thoughts right.
Yeah, I got to cut that one out of the list. Make sure that I have the rest of the list. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, October, I'm taking reins of this podcast and doing scary things the whole month.
When
So-
did you
It's gonna
never
get
have reigns of this
spooky.
podcast?
Never. Not when it comes to horror stuff. I don't get to do nearly as much horror stuff as I want to do.
Really?
I feel like we've done like a lot of horror
We
stuff.
have not.
I don't
How many
know,
episodes
Matt.
have I
We
been
need some
on?
statistics on like our horror versus like comic versus XYZ. And
I mean,
feel
you
like
did a lot
horror's
of
pretty
dead
up there.
people. Doesn't that count as horror too?
Matt, no.
Oh, okay.
Matt, I really would like to see you do a statistical breakdown of episode topics you've covered.
No, I think
I did
we
that.
should,
I did that our
because-
first year, and then we got to do so many episodes. I was like, this is getting too much work.
Well,
to
no,
do.
because like the only real horror things I did was we did the horror episode when we first started. I've done Night of the Living Dead, Halloween, Scream, this one. I don't think I've done much
Scary
more.
stories.
Oh yeah, Scary Stories. That's 6. 6 out of 115.
I don't know. Let's go through these. Horror Matters. I'm counting Buffy.
Well, that's fine.
I'm counting Aliens.
I didn't do that one, and technically we don't promote that section of our podcast. So,
Yeah, but we still did
but that
it. and you
wasn't
did a
me.
portion of
It doesn't
That one
count. It
counts.
wasn't me.
True crime. That counts.
The true crime
That does
counts.
Shark Week
That
technically
was
counts when we
Matt.
talk about
No,
Jaws.
but we rarely talk. We did not talk about Jaws that
Don't
much.
you
That
dare
doesn't
throw
count.
Jaws in there.
There's the Scream
Yes.
episode, of course. Resident Evil,
Yeah.
Halloween. We did back-to-back horror episodes, actually. What else we got? What do you got? DDT. That counts.
Yeah.
Jessica Jones?
No.
No.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I was reaching with that one.
I don't know. Trauma horror. That's all we got. All I hear from Kate
I
is
know,
there's so
trauma
many
horror.
horrors.
That's what I was
Shut
thinking.
up.
Right? Planet Earth is technically like
That was a horror for
just
you.
Earth horror.
That was
No.
horror for you. You cried on that
Mr.
episode.
Rogers, for
That was
sure.
horror.
Then we did a bunch of dead people. I'm in the dead.
That does
people
not
thing right now.
count.
I know it doesn't count. I'm just saying. Night of the Living Dead.
Yes.
Twilight Zone.
Yes.
Yeah. That's about what? Almost 15 now? Episodes?
15 out of 115. Look at that.
Blair Witch.
That's 10% of our show.
Okay, 10% of our show.
Scary Stories. Years, if you want to talk about all the gore we
It's
talked
not
about.
horror.
And Stephen King. That is way more than 6. That's more than 6.
Okay, that's way
That's-
more
that's a
than
decent-
6,
that's a decent-
but nothing.
That's a decent portion. That's at least
Oh
10.
my
That's at
God.
least a little
We're
less
looking
than
about 10%, which is not bad considering theoretically you're only supposed to have 30%. Or 33%.
I'm just saying. We've done a lot of horror. And it's not an indictment on you doing
That
horror.
doesn't even
I'm glad
include
you
all
get to
the Patreon episodes that are a lot of
do
horror.
Patreon episode reviews, yeah.
There's a lot in there.
I'm just saying, like, it's spooky time, Kate. I get it.
Uh-huh.
But also, it's been spooky time since like episode 6.
No, it has not. I do not get to do that many. Not as many as I want.
That's true. Okay, that makes more sense.
Because Matt just says no. And then Adrian says, well, I'm not going to watch it. And then I'm like, Alex!
Yeah,
and I'm like, I've already seen it.
That's usually how it goes, yeah.
But yeah, so get ready for that. And you can find the podcast, as always, up at Why the PC on all of our social medias. And if you want to support us a little bit more, head on over to patreon.com/butwhythepc. And at the $10 level, you can make us watch movies. Hint, hint, October is coming. Give us spooky things. Adrian? Oh, wait, no. And you can find me at OM300 on Twitter.
What?
Adrian.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SuperRuiz93, SUPERRUIZ 93.
Matt.
And I'm going to finish this episode the way Stephen King did a lot of his stuff.